Good Monday afternoon to you. 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. Training camp for the Browns less than a month away. They'll get it underway at the Greenbrier in West Virginia. Mike Lombardi, former NFL front office type, gave his thoughts on the Browns team this year as they head into training camp. This from the Pat McAfee Show.
I think Cleveland's a sleeper team here because I think Jim Schwartz will make a difference in their defense. They've got good rushers on the edge. You obviously with Myles Garrett, they get Zadarius Smith. They're going to be better defensively. One thing about a Jim Schwartz defense, go back to Tennessee or even Philadelphia, they make you one-dimensional. You got to throw the ball. He's going to play those wide nines. You can't run bootlegs and nakeds on his team. And they're going to make you have to throw the ball to beat them. And that team, they got first-round picks in their secondary. And I don't think Watson can play as bad as he did. They have a really good offensive line. Nick Chubb's an elite player. I think this is a team, if they don't do dumb things, 4th and inches at their own 25 in the first quarter, go for it. I think, to me, they can be really good.
Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as brownzone.com. If they don't do dumb things, they can be really, that's it's a backhanded compliment, I suppose.
Yeah, it sounds like a shot at Kevin Stefanski to me, and maybe the analytics group in general. Yeah, I think Lombardi's right about a lot of things there. He goes back a long way with Jim Schwartz, right? Schwartz got to start here under Belichick. We know Lombardi and Belichick were tight, so Lombardi was here in the 90s when Belichick and Schwartz were. So I get that connection, and I think Schwartz is going to have a big improvement. That's what the Browns or be a big improvement. I think that's what the Browns are banking on. And he's right about a lot of that stuff. I think Watson can't play as bad as he did. You like Garrett, you like Zadarius Smith. The one thing I questioned there was, the Schwartz defense wants to attack. And part of me wonders if it is vulnerable to a team that says, hey, we're just going to run it right up the middle because you got your ends wide and you seem kind of maybe light in the box unless you put a bunch of bodies down there. So I don't know if it's automatically makes teams throw the ball, but it would be interesting if they did that because I think that's exactly what the Browns are hoping teams will do.
Yeah, the other thing about it is, like you said, Schwartz defense is attack. It's aggressive. Right there, it has an identity. And I would argue the Browns defense did not have an identity for the last 3 years, probably.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. I think it is important. I don't know exactly how important it is. If you had a bunch of good players and you do a bunch of good things, do you have to say, hey, we're attacking or we're this or that? But I certainly think it's obvious what Schwartz's defense's identity is, and he's not hiding it. Everybody knows it. They're going to attack. They're going to get after the quarterback, and they're going to rotate a bunch of guys up front. They'll probably play a lot of man-to-man. They'll probably put extra people in the box to stop the run and compensate for the defensive lineman just heading up the field. And I think it simplifies things. I do think it gives everybody a sense of comfort and calm knowing this is exactly what we did. And whether that's identity or not, it felt like that was missing too many times under Joe Woods.
Do you think it's the Browns are willing to do that because you're obviously going to give up some big plays? Are you willing to do that because you feel like you have the ability to make big plays now on offense as well with Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Dave. I think it all plays into it. I felt like, especially during those Baker years, right, the Stefanski-Baker years, it felt like to me they were trying to manage the game a lot. The coaching staff, right? Kevin would talk about, okay, we thought it would be this kind of game. And if they didn't think it was going to be a high-scoring game, a lot of times they would play close to the vest. And they thought, okay, it's going to come down to one play or come down to the fourth quarter. And I think part of that was they didn't trust Baker to go put up a ton of points, right, and throw the ball all over the field. Well, if you're paying Deshaun Watson $230 million guaranteed, you better trust him. And I think there's been an organizational shift, and maybe it's not a philosophical shift. Maybe it's just a game plan shift given the supposed upgrade at quarterback, right? Or I believe it's an upgrade. And you'll see the Browns make more big plays. If they get into a shootout, I don't think they're going to freak out. But I think the overall plan is, hey, we're going to be attacking on both sides of the ball, get a lead, and then it's going to be more difficult for teams to come back on us because you can get after the quarterback with Garrett and Smith and Obo and Tomlinson in the rest of that front.
Yeah, I would agree. I know you wrote an article a couple weeks ago after minicamp about Elijah Moore just lining up pretty much everywhere. Do you get the sense it's kind of almost like a Deebo Samuel, and everybody wants to throw Deebo Samuel around, but is that kind of the role you envision?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go full core Deebo, right? There's a lot of running, a lot of carries that Deebo gets, but I certainly expect to see more lined up in the backfield. I don't know how often. Could I see him as, a quasi third down back on occasion? Not the guy, right? But on third down, could you go, 3 wides at tight end and have him in the backfield and really challenge the defense? Yeah, I could see Kevin Stefanski and Alex Van Pelt doing that. I certainly see him in the slot. You'll see him outside. The Browns, despite him not being the biggest guy, the Browns feel he can win on the outside. And that's one of the things they really liked about him when they made the trade is he's not just a slot guy. He can play outside. And I think the wrinkle that showed up to me in these OTAs and minicamp was he would line up in the backfield from time to time. And you'd see Watson and him run an option, right? So I do think they're going to try to get the ball in his hands in a variety of ways because they think, we talked about Schwartz having a big impact on the defense. I think the Browns really feel that Moore elevates the entire offense, not only the passing game.
Yeah, and it was a skill set that they were lacking without question. This from the Bleacher Report. Forgotten 2022 NFL draft picks to watch in training camp for 2023. For the Browns, they go David Bell. Fans should expect the Browns to push Bell for playing time. Even with the new additions in the fold, Peoples-Jones entering final year of his rookie deal. Cooper could be a 2024 cap casualty. According to Spot Track, Browns could save 12.4 by releasing the 29-year-old next season. Bell has a chance to become a big part of Cleveland's future with a strong training camp. It's present, too. I agree. I don't think David Bell necessarily had a bad year last year for a third-round pick. He got hurt and just couldn't catch up. And once the season starts, you're doing anything you can to win games.
Yeah, you're right about that. And we certainly know that this front office is beyond hesitant to give up on draft picks, right? We've seen it. There's example after example. Anthony Schwartz is, a perfect one. So I think Bell qualifies as a forgotten 2022 draft pick. I won't argue that at all. I question whether the Browns really believe he can be a mainstay of this offense in this passing game moving forward. They're right about Donovan Peoples-Jones being in the last year of his contract. They're right about the Cooper salary. But I just haven't seen any indication. And I know it's only been a year, right? But I haven't seen any indication that David Bell is a special NFL talent. He's got good hands. He can sit in the zone and find that soft spot, but I don't think he can separate. He already had the injuries as a rookie. So to me, this is a big prove-it year for David Bell. And while I certainly have him on my, 53-man roster coming out of camp, I'm not sure it's guaranteed that he makes this team. So I need to see more out of him before I start thinking he's going to have a big impact in 2023.
Yeah, without question, that's fair. The hands do, that was elite when he was able to be part of the drills a season ago. But you're right, though. No speed, the athleticism wasn't, it was average. Average with really good hands.
Right, and then you go draft Cedric Tillman, right, in the third round, which means there must not have been, they obviously weren't satisfied with the receiving core. They traded for Moore, they signed Goodwin, and they draft Tillman.
Yeah, that's fair by any estimation. All right, NFL teams ranked by their offensive arsenals. This is from ESPN.com. They go 49ers 1, Bengals 2. The Browns are ranked 12th, ahead of the Steelers, who were 13th, and the Ravens, who were 15th. Browns were 4th back in 2021, 23rd a season ago. And the 2021 one was, Odell Beckham and all that craziness. 12th still seems kind of low when you have Nick Chubb. And again, I think what they're questioning is how good is Deshaun Watson going to be?
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a lot of that today. It was Bill Barnwell, and he's a big analytics guy, and he he does a ton of research for those. So I find a lot of stuff he does really interesting. Um, I actually think he takes the quarterback out of the equation there. I think it was only the skill guys, but what he did was he devalued the running back position and the tight end position because he thinks receivers are more important, and kind of he kind of rationalized that by saying, they make more money, right? The top 5 receivers in the league make more money than the top tight end or the top running back. So it's slanted toward who has the best receiving core, and that's why one of the reasons the Bengals rank so highly. But he said Chubb's in a world by himself, which elevates the Browns. He's high on David Njoku. Thought he had a good year last year. And there's some analytic stats, yards per route run, and things like that. So yeah, I didn't know where the Browns would fall. I thought it was really interesting. 12 seems about right to me. Especially if you take the quarterback out of the situation. They're high on Cooper, so I think it's interesting. I think I would rank them ahead of Baltimore and Pittsburgh as well, just looking at the skill spots. And, that's why the Browns should be in the discussion to be the second best team in the division, at least entering the season.
Fair enough. The 49ers at number 1, McCaffrey's still a running back. That's one that's kind of a head scratcher. I mean,
they really like McCaffrey. They like Debo. Kittle's really good. I think that seems to be less about the receiving core than everybody around. The tight ends and the running backs and the slash players. But yeah, I was surprised that it was the 49ers.
All right, before I let you go, this is a question from Dog Pound Daily. Can Nick Chubb succeed in an offense that's built around Deshaun Watson?
I mean, I think Nick Chubb can succeed in any offense, right? I really do. If you asked him to only be a receiver, I think he'd still be pretty good, but not. That's just wasting what he does best. But, I think the Browns are still going to give the ball to Chubb 16 to 20 times a game. And I think you can have a lot of success doing that. And I don't think it's going to be a big fall off from how many times he got the ball in the past. And, we talked to Stump Mitchell, the running back coach, at the end of minicamp. And he said, maybe it's a different way. Maybe we throw in the ball more, and that's how, you kind of even out the touches. But yeah, I think Chubb's going to have success. I think if the Browns get leads, Chubb's going to get the ball a ton. I think he'll get the ball on 3rd and short, get the ball near the goal line. I think he's still going to be really impactful.
I do too, and I don't think they're going to be able to stack the box. I mean, there's a mobile quarterback with a strong arm and better wide receivers. So I think he's going to be more efficient, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does, Dave, and I think you're right. And I think it's going to look different, right? The fans, how many fans we have still want a fullback, right? Which, almost no one has in the league. But, I don't think they'll be 2 and 3 wide nearly as much. I think they'll be spread out more. But if that makes more room for Nick Chubb to run, even better. So I just think it's going to look different. But I think when you get done and you look at the numbers, I'm not sure they're going to be a whole lot different.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Also talk about the impact Jim Schwartz could have on this team. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
I think JOK is going to be a huge piece to whether this defense is a good defense or a really special defense. I do not have worries about the front line, nor do I worry too much about the secondary. Obviously, the linebackers are going to get a lot of relief from the improved line in front of them. But JOK is a little undersized for linebacker. gets run over a good bit. And I think if he can be put somewhere where his speed and coverage ability and, let's see him knocking over the wide receivers and the running backs, not having some offensive tackle pancake him. And Schwartz is going to do that, I have a feeling. If JOK has a great year, I think the defense is going to be out of this world.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, JOK is a guy I'm really anxious to see how Jim Schwartz is able to use him.
Yeah, I thought that caller hit on a lot of good points. The Browns obviously drafted him to be a difference maker, right? They moved up in the draft a couple of years ago in the second round. They don't, that's not what they tend to do. They tend to move down and acquire draft picks. So I think that was significant that they went up to get a guy, especially at that position, right? We know the Browns don't value linebacker a ton. So for them to do that with, JOK, I thought spoke volumes, and he has not lived up to that through 2 years. We've seen flashes, but I think they haven't been sustained. He's had injuries both of his 2 years. I thought it was really interesting. We talked to linebackers coach Jason Tarver. Again, we talked to all the position coaches right at the end of minicamp. And he said that JOK needs to get stronger between the end of minicamp and training camp. And he looked really light to me last year. I think he was light when he got here, and I think he might even lost some weight. And Tarver also said he needs to prove that he knows the system. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was, hey, he's got to show he knows what we're doing in order to get on the field. And to me, it was Tarver challenging JOK. You would think, especially with all the injuries at linebacker, right? Taki and Walker and Phillips coming off injuries, you'd think Phillips would be like the guy, JOK would be the guy. And it didn't look like that in minicamp, right? He was working some on the first team, some on the second team, depending on what package was out there. So I think this is a big prove-it year for JOK. And yeah, if he plays at a really high level, I think this defense takes a big jump. And it'll be interesting, like you said, how Schwartz uses him. I'm not saying linebackers are an afterthought in Schwartz's defense, but it's really predicated on the line and then trusting your secondary. So the linebackers just have to clean up everything. And that puts some pressure on them. And JOK's got to prove that he can take on blocks, make plays in traffic when things are muddled. And that's something that, I think he struggled with in his first 2 years.
This from the Bleacher Report. Biggest coaching adjustments to track in 2023's NFL training camps. Jim Schwartz and a defensive line resurgence for the Browns. Cleveland's defense should feature a lot of creativity and intensity up front, which in turn can help the linebackers and defensive backs play more efficiently. If it adds up to even above average defense, Browns should break back into the postseason hunt. That's fair. The one thing I would say is I think the secondary is pretty talented, and they were kind of miscast with what they were asked to do the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think you're hit on some points there, Dave. You think of Greg Newsome in the slot, and we don't know exactly how Schwartz is going to use him, but it feels like they're not going to ask him to play as many snaps in the slot as he did a year ago, which obviously frustrated Newsome. Did they play too much zone last year? Maybe did that lead to some of the miscommunication? I think you can make an argument there. Things will be simpler under Schwartz. I think he really likes this cornerback group and trusts them. Ward and Newsome and Emerson and even A.J. Green behind them. And he's going to play a bunch of man. And then, to me, the question becomes, are the safeties, can they take the defense? Can they raise the performance of the defense? And we know he trusts Rodney McLeod. He's been with him in Philly, the veteran. Is Juan Thornhill an upgrade over JJ3? I think that remains to be seen. He needs to prove it. He's ultimately confident, talks a good game, has a lot of energy. The Browns hope he can fill that void. And then Grant Delpit, can he take that nenext step? Because it was the last 6-8 games of last season, Delpit really came out and started to look like the second-round pick he was, 4 years ago. But he needs to build on that because, again, this is another big year for him because he's in the last year of his rookie contract.
I know you're working on a story on another one of those young defensive linemen, Okoronkwo. Talk to him one-on-one. Take us through that and kind of what you found with him.
Yeah, some of it is about Schwartz, right? Just the freedom. All the D linemen are saying he takes the seatbelt off, right? So they just have freedom to attack, and he loves that. And he's got a lot of energy, and we talk about that. And the guy, the coaches and the players talk about the energy he brings. And he's kind of got a different style. He's not the biggest DN in the world. Davin Tomlinson, the D tackle, called him, really smooth, just the way he comes around the corner. But what I found interesting is, when the Browns signed him, right, he was one of their first picks. He was a priority free agent in March. And I assumed or presumed that he would be the starter opposite Myles Garrett. It was a big enough contract. Well, then they go and trade for Zadarius Smith, which kind of comes out of nowhere, or feels like it comes out of nowhere. And to me, if I'm Okoronkwo, my reaction is kind of like, hey, this guy's taking some of my reps away, right? I thought I earned a starting role, and now I'm back to being a third end. And, I believed him when he said that that's not how he's thinking. He thinks there's going to be plenty of snaps to go around, that Schwartz likes to rotate guys, so he doesn't think he's going to sacrifice anything. He feels like this is still the best situation for him as he tries to build on what he did in Houston over those last 8 games last season, when I think he had 5 sacks, and really was his first time as a starter in the league. So he's not down about it. He thinks he can have a big role. And when the Browns go nickel, they plan to go Obo and Garrett on the ends, and probably Tomlinson and Smith inside. So I think he's going to get plenty of chances, and that's got him still really confident and comfortable being here. I'm sure the money helps too, right? And Zadarius Smith is only on a 1-year contract. But I bought what he was saying when he didn't, he wasn't shocked by the trade, or not shocked, but he didn't get discouraged by the trade at all. And I think some guys would have when they expected a big bump in role in playing time.
Yeah, and the other thing, Schwartz has talked about playing 5 defensive linemen, 5 down linemen. So that, Obo and Garrett on the ends, and go get them. Meet at the quarterback.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think we'll see a lot of that on third down. I don't know if we'll see that early in downs. But, still, Dave, you know how it works in this league, right?
Yep.
It means something to be a starter, right? Every time I read a story, how many games did the guy play and how many starts did he have? So if you're Obo and you had some selfishness in you and you were thinking, okay, I'm going to be the guy and I'm going to start 17 games, and all of a sudden you sign Smith, who's been to the Pro Bowl a bunch of times, comes in, now he's going to be the guy. I think it's natural to have some frustration or selfishness there, and at least from what he's telling me, that's not an issue. And I think that bodes well for him, and it bodes well for this defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take another timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Plus, take a look at the top interior offensive linemen in the NFL. A couple of Browns being mentioned here. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick from the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. Just a couple things, brother. Number one, Deshaun Watson, guaranteed he makes the national media eat crow this year. He's had the whole off season. He's going to have a full training camp and everything. They will eat crow. Number two is the word of the year for the Browns is execute. All the pieces of the puzzle were there. It's time to execute. All right, Dave, great show. Love you, brother. Be safe.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I in hearing that, I can think of the Tampa Bay head coach, the expansion years. Execute. If it doesn't lead to wins, there will be the action of that execution.
Yeah, right. John McKay, right? I'm all for it.
Yeah.
The execution.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what? I think the caller's dead right about the second thing. You know, we've talked about it a million times. I think the talent is there on this roster. It's not a perfect roster, but I think it's plenty good enough to win games. I think it's elite at certain positions and certain key positions. When you talk about Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, I don't know if Amari Cooper's elite, but he's really good at a premium position. Denzel Ward. So offensive line, right? So I think they have the pieces. Now it's being able to do it when it counts. And that's, on game day, it's on third down, it's in the red zone, it's in the fourth quarter. And a lot of that is Deshaun Watson. And I get the optimism that the caller had about Watson and making everyone eat their words. And he could be right. I just think you need to see it, right? And I know the talent's there. I know there are really encouraging signs in minicamp, but he's got to show it because he hasn't shown it consistently during games in 2 seasons.
Yeah, those are all fair. And I tend to agree with him. I think he's going to have a good year, but we need to see that translate on Sundays. All right, this from CBS Sports. Top 10 interior offensive linemen in the NFL. Number 1, they go Zach Martin from Dallas. Number 2, Jason Kelce from the Eagles. Number 3, Joel Bitonio. First-team All-Pro each of the last 2 years. Bitonio has allowed just 2.7% pressure rate over that stretch, with just 3 sacks allowed in 1,221 pass blocking snaps. 3 sacks in over 1,220 pass blocking snaps. That's how good Joel Bitonio's been. Other names under consideration: Wyatt Teller. So Browns have the third and a best of the not mentioned. And when you start thinking about offensive line, if you keep pressure out of the middle, that's huge for a quarterback.
It is, and those guys are getting paid like it, right? They both signed those big extensions during the 2021 season. Bitonio, he might be too low on that list, and I'm not an interior offensive line expert, but I know I talked to Joe Thomas, and he says Bitonio's the best guard in the league. Even with Martin, he thinks he's better. Kelsey's fantastic. He's getting up there. Whatever. It's a great honor for both those guys, or all 3 of those guys. But Bitonio is a big-time player, has been for a long time. We always talk about the guys who touch the ball or around the ball, Myles Garrett, those kind of things. But, you can make an argument the best player on this team is, Bitonio deserves to be mentioned. Whether it's Nick Chubb or Myles Garrett or Joe Bitonio, I think for the last few years, it's come down to those 3 guys who've consistently been the best 3 guys on this team. So, Bitonio deserves everything, every honor he gets, every recognition he gets. And you're right, Dave. We talked about, and when I was mentioning all the elite positions, I did not mention those guys. And the offensive line is a big part of this. I think there's questions at the tackle spots, just given Conklin's injury history, given Jed Will's inconsistency. But, the Browns feel good about those 3 guys in the middle.
And, as we're talking about that, and you mentioned he's been good for so long, couple more years at the top of the league, and he might be right next to Joe Thomas with one of those gold jackets they give Hall of Famers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when they extended Bitonio in 2021, Andrew Berry said that in the press release. And it kind of caught me like, you know what, all right, now there's the discussion. And then I talked to Joe Thomas about him, and he mentioned it too. So, yeah, it's been, he was drafted in that 2014 draft to Johnny Manziel. So this is a decade. And he's played at a really high level. He missed that second season. He had injuries. Since then, he's been automatic, right? Hasn't missed a snap in a long time. Regular season, he missed that playoff game with COVID. But yeah, offensive line, it's tough. But if you have the Joe Thomas kind of endorsement and you play 12, 14 years and you make a bunch of All-Pros and Pro Bowls, which he started to pile up, and maybe your team finally wins some games and you get some of the January and February recognition, I think there is a path for Joe Bitonio to get to camp.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Bleacher Report. Veteran free agent contracts the Browns must consider before training camp. They go Matt Ioannidis, defensive tackle. Even if he doesn't have a huge ceiling, solid player who could be a solid short-term addition. J.D. McKissick, running back. Perhaps the Browns will bring in another back to add to the mix. If so, McKissick could be an ideal fit, experienced pass catcher. And linebacker Miles Jack. Jack only 27, not set to turn 28 until September. That's why it could make a lot of sense for Cleveland to pursue Jack if he's willing to sign. Low-cost prove-it deal for 2023. Scott, I like all of those guys just fine. I don't see the Browns going out and spending. I think they have $13-15 million under the cap. I think they would like to roll that over or keep it in case somebody gets hurt. I think they're going to see what they have before they do any of that. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I think your points are right. And if they can roll over enough, then that helps defray some of the costs, right? Because they got some big cap hits coming up. But the reason those guys make sense is because they're all positions where there are certain questions. And, D-tackle, I think the Browns feel comfortable there. They got Tomlinson. They bring back Jordan Elliott. They signed Maurice Hurst. They brought in Tristan Hill. They have Perry and Winfrey coming back. They have Tommy Togiai. There's a lot of guys there. Maybe the second guy isn't as good as Ioannidis, right? Maybe I can see how you can consider that an upgrade, but I don't sense a lot of pressure there from the Browns to go get somebody, especially if you're only going to play him or down or two, and then you're going to go to the 3 ends package. Jack has bounced around a bunch of places recently. He's a guy that was a high pick, looks impressive on the field, but he hasn't really stuck. But the Browns have questions at linebacker, given the injuries to Walker and Takitaki. They didn't practice yet. Are they going to be ready to go at the start of camp? We don't really know that. So maybe he's a guy to keep in mind on the back burner to see how it shakes out with injuries throughout training camp in the preseason. And then, I think the Browns might bring in a running back at some point. And, maybe McKissick is the guy. I kind of like that style, the contrast to Chubb and Jerome Ford. Of all those guys, and maybe all those positions even, I could see a running back added to the mix, especially if you're not comfortable with Demetric Felton. Like, right now, it seems like Felton's kind of that third guy. Hasn't shown a lot in 2 years. I know he's bounced around. Maybe he can be the pass catcher you want on some third downs. But adding another body there makes sense to me.
Yeah, the thing that I guess the reason I don't think they're going to sign anybody, there's going to be that 2-week gap where everybody gets cut at once that's in training camp, and there's going to be a lot of people kind of shuffling through the back end of pretty much every roster, I would guess.
Yeah, and you could probably save some money, right? McKissick's in his 6th or 7th year. There's a veteran minimum there. Maybe you just find a young guy you like. That's a position that they're already, highly invested in with Chubb. So, yeah, I get your point. And, when we look at this roster, it's a lot about the bottom of the roster. And we could see significant changes when you're right. This is the first time everyone gets cut. So you're looking at, 37 guys times 32 teams. 900 guys are going to be floating around. The Browns might just figure they have a better chance on the waiver wire.
Scott Petrick and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break, back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, how you doing? This is Len Clampett calling from Okinawa, Japan. I'm a Canadian, but a big Browns fan. And I want to make a comment on this coming year. There's lots of talk of the first 4 games for the Browns. And especially some talk about the Browns' need to win that game against the Bengals the very first game. And my message today is to say that that is the least important game on the schedule. The Bengals are like in their third season of their Super Bowl contending formula, and the Browns haven't even started their first season of building an identity. And we all kind of know that that comes around November. So a win here by the Browns would be massive for the Browns and a shocker for the Bengals. Anything can happen, though. They might pull it out. It might have to be Garrett knocking the quarterback down, but don't put all the stock into that first game. Just enjoy it. The Browns are going to be massively exciting to watch this year. Thanks for letting me give my 2 cents. Cheers.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, all of those, I think all of the division games are going to be important because I think the North is going to be that close. I think the point he's making is it's not the end of the season if the Browns lose the first game. Probably true, but man, there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dave. I don't think you can say that it's the least important game of the season. They need to get off to a good start this year. They just do. And the schedule's front-loaded with those AFC North games. If they can get off to a good start, they can build some momentum. They can kind of stake a little bit of a claim to the division early. If they don't, it just – and maybe this is just the media/fan covered this team for a long time, but it feels like the confidence is fragile, right? Organizationally, certainly from a fan base perspective, I feel like the confidence is fragile. And you don't have that in Cincinnati. So if Cincinnati goes 0-3, they trust Joe Burrow to figure it out. If the Browns go 0-3 or 0-3 in the division in the first 4 games, why would you have confidence that they're going to figure it out, right? There's no track record of that. So I do think the beginning of the season is important. I think week 1 is a chance to steal a game from the Bengals. The Browns have big changes at defensive coordinator. The offense is going to look different. You might be able to surprise Cincinnati a little bit. They've had some success against Joe Burrow in his in his short career. So, it's not the end of the world if they lose, but they could get a whole lot of momentum. And, it might be the end of the world if they start 1-3 and, head into that early bye. I just think they need to get off to a good start for everything to settle down because there's a lot of pressure on everyone heading into the season.
Yeah. Expectations bring pressure in the NFL, and there are, rightly so, there's some important expectations for the Browns. All right. This is from the Bleacher Report. Redrafting the 2018 NFL Draft. With the number 1 pick, they have the Browns taking Josh Allen instead of Baker Mayfield. Number 2 pick to the Giants, they have Lamar Jackson instead of Saquon Barkley. They have the Jets going Daron Payne instead of quarterback Sam Darnold with the 3rd pick. For the 4th pick, they have the Browns going Jair Alexander instead of Denzel Ward. So I guess, to me, that 4th pick is kind of a wash where they have the Browns picked Ward. They haven't taken Jair Alexander. They have Ward going 9th overall to the 49ers. They have the Commanders taking Wyatt Teller 13th overall. The Seahawks picking Nick Chubb 18th overall. Baker Mayfield was not picked in the first round. So it's kind of interesting. The Browns end up with 4 guys that would have gone in the first round.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, Josh Allen would be the pick instead of Mayfield, and John Dorsey missed on that one. And who knows how that would have changed the franchise, right? I mean, it's huge when you get those number 1 picks. You draft the wrong guy at the position. It affects you. The Browns would not have had to go after Deshaun Watson. The cap would be in a different spot. Like, there's so many repercussions. But I think the rest of it's really interesting. Alexander's probably had a better career than Ward to this point. But if Ward, plays at a high level the next 2 years, I think you could redraft it, and Ward would deserve to be at number 4. So, I don't think 4's a bad spot for Ward, especially if you go 9 in the redraft. What I find interesting is it seems high for Teller. I mean, I know Teller's been good, and he's been to a Pro Bowl or 2. It seems high for a guard. And, I know running back is devalued, and I feel that way, and I would not draft one high. I was stunned when the Lions took their guy high and the Falcons took their guy high this year. But knowing what we know about Nick Chubb, I think I would take him ahead of Wyatt Teller.
I would agree. Again, Nick Chubb, you can say the same conversation that we had about Joel Bitonio. Now, Nick Chubb is a few years behind, but if he continues to rack up Pro Bowls and gain 1,200, 1,500, 18 yards, another 3-4 seasons, you're going to have that same conversation about him in the gold jacket.
Yeah, it felt premature. I had this discussion with somebody last year, and it felt premature to me. But in that ESPN article we referenced earlier, the Bill Barnwell one, some of the Chubb analytical numbers, the secondary stats are incredible, and he's so far in front of everyone in the league. And then if you take him and Derrick Henry, there's a huge drop off to the rest of the running backs. So, and I think there's a reference to the Hall of Fame in there. So yeah, he's a couple years away at the same level he's been the last 3 or 4 years from being a legitimate Hall of Fame candidate. And, guard's an important position, but it's not left tackle, right? It's not defensive end. It's not receiver. It's not corner. So if you're going to take somebody ahead of Nick Chubb, I don't think I'd take a guard. Yeah, no offense to Joe Bitonio or Wyatt Teller.
No, I agree with you. I get and when you look at it, guards usually end of the first round, not middle of the first round. Scott Petrak, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Always really good stuff. Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also check out his stuff, brownzone.com. Check it out. Really good stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, this is Buddy Browns. I was thinking, what could keep the Browns from going real far? I'm talking Super Bowl even. And the answer is not the roster. I think it really comes down to only two things. It's going to come down to quarterback play, being somewhere maybe in the top 8 quarterbacks, top 7 or 8, should be just fine. And you know what? It's going to come down to a little luck. Because no matter what sport you look at, any championship team, they'll tell you they had a lot of luck. Some bounces that went the right way, Maybe they didn't get screwed by the refs as many as some teams, or as badly, I should say. And injuries. I hate to say it, knock on wood, but there comes a time in almost every year where you see teams missing 6, 7 starters. And the whole key is going to be, are we going to lose some of our best players just for a game or here and there? Because if we don't have big problems with top players missing lots of games, I'm looking at this roster, and I think all it's going to take is a little luck and some good quarterback play. And there is not one team in the NFL that I'm intimidated by.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dogs podcast as well as Network 216. I can't argue with anything. You know, luck and injuries are always factors. The other thing I would say, the defense has to play better than it did a year ago. And I think it will, but I got to see it too.
Yeah, I agree with everything that the caller stated there, Dave, because, again, the quarterback play, first and foremost, is huge. You don't see a lot of NFL teams ever making the playoffs with subpar quarterback play. It very rarely happens, if at all. So Deshaun Watson obviously is the biggest key to the Browns' success this year. But also they mentioned luck. Luck always plays a part in a team making the playoffs because one thing that is out of your control is injuries. The teams that are least bitten by the injury bug normally are teams that also have the best chance to make the playoffs. So that's really what's going to come down to for the Browns this year. You really hope that they can stay healthy. But one of the things the Browns also have more of than in years past is depth at key positions. And I think that's really going to help them this year. But at the same time, Myles Garrett stays healthy. If Denzel Ward can still play the majority of the games this year, and of course Deshaun Watson staying healthy, the Browns are going to be in good position to make the playoffs this year. So definitely agree with what the caller said. But it's always going to come down to health and the quarterback play.
Yep, the quarterback play, and you got to be able to get quarterbacks that can score late. And you give them the ball in the fourth quarter, 3 minutes left. You want the defense to go, we're in trouble. We've been on the other side of that, so let's get that from the Browns quarterback. All right, this is from Dog Pound Daily. 3 early overreactions from the Browns offseason. Number 3, the Browns should be predicted to be winners. Number 2, Browns wide receivers are loaded. And number 1, the Browns defense will be elite. When I look at this, Tyler, those are all fair, and I'm probably guilty of 2 of the 3.
I'm right there with you because a lot of times, like we look at the wide receivers, you add Elijah Moore, you add Cedric Tillman, Marquise Goodwin, you bring more talent to the position, we automatically think, oh, yeah, we are loaded at wide receiver. But at the same time, outside of Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, and you can make the argument Marquise Goodwin has produced from time to time, but he's been had a lot of injuries throughout his career. The Browns wide receivers do need to prove that they are as good as advertised. A lot of us believe that there's a lot of talent now at the position, but we have to see it. So I think that's a really good one. The Browns defense will be elite. You bring in Jim Schwartz, one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL. You expect the defense to be a lot better. You add a lot more talent on the defensive side of the ball. You expect the defense to be a lot better. That's definitely an overreaction. We have to see it. Like, this is all great because on paper, that's how it should be. The Browns should be better, especially in those 2 key areas. But now we got to show that. And then the third one, Browns should be predicted as winners. I think the entire fan base believes that because of all the additions we've made this offseason. It's very fair to believe that the Browns should be a playoff contender this year. The Browns should be guaranteed to make the playoffs. They should win the AFC North. But again, we do have to see it. And I think I'm a little bit more reasonable, I would say, than some of the predictions because I do think if you look at 10-7 this year, that's very reasonable for the Browns and getting a wild card spot. I do believe that you're in a position, too, to where you can win the AFC North, but it's going to be a dogfight for that division. So those are all really true when it comes to overreactions. We have to see how it all plays out on the field.
Yep. And, as far as the national folks doubting it. 7-10 last year when everybody thought the roster was pretty good. So I get the skepticism. This is from Browns Wire. They ask, is Nick Harris in danger of being cut? Before you answer that, remember, he was going to be the starting center last year before he got injured on the first play in preseason. And then he's also played some guard. He has some regular season NFL snaps at guard where he was pretty good.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate with Nick Harris because I remember when he was drafted, they talked about what a good fit he was for Kevin Stefanski's zone scheme that the Browns are going to be running, and eventually he would be the starting center that would replace at the time J.C. Tretter when J.C. Tretter decided to move on, or the Browns decided to move on from J.C. Tretter. Injuries have really, that injury last year really, I think, hurt Nick Harris a lot because not only is he in danger of being cut this year, a big reason why he is in danger of being cut, the Browns were able to snag Luke Whippler in the 6th round this year. And now you think that Luke Whippler, a 6th-round pick, he's really going to make the roster over Nick Harris. Well, Luke Whippler is going to be a pretty cheap rookie on his deal. And if Luke Whippler is as good as some believe, because he was the 2nd-best center a lot believe in this class, even though he's not the most athletic, there is a good chance that could push Nick Harris out of a job. And the Browns have so much talent invested at offensive line, not only starters, but even some of their backups. I mean, Michael Dunn, Drew Forbes, you have Nick Harris, you have Luke Whippler, you now have DeWan Jones, James Hudson. There's a lot of talent now. Wes Martin that we signed this offseason. There's a lot more talent on the offensive line as backups. Nick Harris is going to have a strong training camp in preseason in order to make the Browns roster, because I think if you look at it right now, Luke Whippler has a better chance of making this roster over Nick Harris. And I think the big reason why the Browns just drafted Luke Whippler, and you got a steal for getting Whippler that late in the draft. And I think Nick Harris is going to have to overperform in order to make the roster this offseason. But again, it's really unfortunate that he suffered an injury on the first play last year because, like you said, Dave, Nick Harris was supposed to be the heir apparent to J.C. Tretter. And now it looks like he has an uphill battle to make this roster.
Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dogs podcast, as well as Network 216, and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear about the trend with safeties being versatile in the NFL and why the Browns are doing that. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Tyler Johnson from the Faithful Dogs podcast, as well as Network 216. This is Greg Cosell, NFL Films, talking about the Browns' defense under Jim Schwartz following the trend of having versatile safeties. This is from the X's and O's podcast.
You don't want to get stuck, with the idea that only one safety can only play on the back end and one safety can only play closer to the line of scrimmage. I think you become very, very predictable defensively if that's the case. You don't want that. Now, if you have unbelievably great personnel across the board, certainly I guess the 2013 Seahawks would be the example.
I was going to say, if you have Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, Earl Thomas for a 5 or 6 year period was as good a back-end post safety as we've seen in the league. And Cam Chancellor obviously was 6'4", 232 pounds. So he was not going to play very many snaps at all on the back end, and he didn't. Every once in a while they did just as a change-up, but obviously, again, not knowing percentages, but I would bet 90% of their snaps, Thomas was the post safety and Chancellor was closer to the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, they didn't flip that around a lot.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they didn't really do that. But I think in an ideal world in today's NFL, you would like your safeties to be interchangeable. First of all, you're going to play a lot of that quarters look that we talked about, but you don't want to give the offense a tell. You don't want them to know that, hey, this guy's going to do one thing and this guy's going to do another thing.
And Tyler, we keep hearing about the versatility and how Jim Schwartz wants to use it. That's why, you've heard Juan Thornhill and McLeod and Grant Delpit saying they're being trained all over the place. That's because they're going to use them all over the place.
Exactly. And if you look at with Juan Thornhill, probably out of the guys you mentioned, he's the one that's been the least versatile. But even in Kansas City this past year, he still played 145 snaps out of the box. He played a majority of his snaps at free safety, 702. But then in the slot, 156 snaps. I mean, that shows that he is a versatile player, even though Kansas City really didn't use him that way. But Juan Thornhill is versatile. And then you look at Grant Delpit, even how he was used last year by Joe Woods, 155 snaps out of the slot, 441 at free safety, 429 in the box. And then Rodney McLeod throughout his entire NFL career has been used everywhere, not only at free safety, but as a box safety and as a slot corner. So Jim Schwartz is going to move these guys all around, and I think that's going to be really beneficial for the Browns because you're going to be able to send out so many different looks at offenses. One series you might have Juan Thornhill in the slot. You might have Grant Delpit at free safety. On another one, you might have Grant Delpit in the slot, Juan Thornhill at free safety. There's so many different looks that you can have, and then you bring in Rodney McLeod as your third safety. You're going to really confuse some offenses out there, and that's what I really love about Jim Schwartz and how he plans to really use these guys. He's going to put them everywhere. We might even see Denzel Ward. We've already heard Denzel Ward might be playing some slot snaps this year. So you have so much talent in your secondary. Take advantage of that. There's no reason to pigeonhole these guys into one position, especially as athletic as the Browns secondary is. Take advantage of these skill sets, and we know Jim Schwartz is going to put these guys in position to succeed, and most importantly, in position to really confuse offensive coordinators and quarterbacks throughout the rest of the league.
Yeah, he'll be matching up, looking for matchups that he can win, and he'll keep going to them. All right, this is from Dog Pound Daily as well. 3 nightmare scenarios for the Browns in 2023. Number 3, the revamped defense doesn't pan out. Number 2, Nick Chubb starts to slow down. And number 1, Deshaun Watson doesn't return to form. Any of those 3 are not good for what is expected to be a pretty big season for the Browns.
Yeah, when you think of all those really are the nightmare scenarios. If this revamped defense doesn't pan out, I think we're all convinced that nobody is able to get the best out of these players on defense. If Jim Schwartz can't do it, I don't know what you do. I think you have to look at trying to trade some guys at that point because Jim Schwartz is truly one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL and has proven that throughout his time as a defensive coordinator and won a Super Bowl as defensive coordinator of the Eagles. So there's plenty of talent on this defense. And we all believe Joe Woods, his defense was too confusing for these guys. If Jim Schwartz can't get the best out of these guys, I don't know what you do. Nick Chubb starting to slow down is one that kind of worries me a little bit, but at the same time, the Browns have had Kareem Hunt these last couple of years, so Nick Chubb isn't getting the same amount of carries as Jonathan Taylor, as Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, some of these other elite running backs in the NFL. And then Deshaun Watson returning to form. I think that one's legitimate, but at the same time, we know he was rusty from this past year. Again, when you're not playing for nearly 2 years, anyone would be rusty in that situation. So I'm not necessarily as worried about Deshaun Watson returning to form. I think the biggest one for me is Nick Chubb starting to slow down a little bit because when you're 28 years old, approaching 29, that's around the time in your NFL career as a running back that you do start to slow down a little bit. But again, the good news with Nick Chubb, he's had Kareem Hunt these last couple of years to really take some of the load off of him. And I think that's really beneficial. And I think that could even prolong Nick Chubb's career. So definitely some nightmare scenarios, but you know what? We're all going to hope for the best, and hopefully none of those play out this season.
Well, the other thing about Nick Chubb, though, is the way, and we've seen it on social media, the way he works out, that's another thing that there have been a number of guys that have gone into their early to mid-30s at a high level. Adrian Peterson comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The fact that Adrian Peterson even talked about that he would still like to play if he was given the opportunity. And we saw how long Frank Gore was able to play as an NFL player. So if Nick Chubb continues to take care of his body the way he is, and the Browns are not giving him consistently 300 carries per season, Nick Chubb could be in the mold of Adrian Peterson, just continuing to extend his NFL career. So really hope that is the case for him.
Tyler Johnson, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tyler.
Thank you, Dave. Always my pleasure.
Tyler Johnson, make sure you check him out. Faithful Dogs podcast, as well as Network 216. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.